Hey everyone, welcome to Bridge Stories. This is our new podcast giving people space and time to tell their stories of encountering God and being changed by Him. We hope you're encouraged by these stories and also that you leave excited that you know a lot of really awesome people a little bit better. So sit back and enjoy. For whatever reason, how our paths have crossed over the years, I feel like I know just enough about you to be really interested and curious, but it seems like every time I see you, I end up in a really deep conversation with your wife. So I just thought, my turn to talk to him, Anita.
Okay.
And you're coming straight from getting your eyes dilated.
Yes.
So everyone who's watching this, you need to thank Don that he's sitting under the bright lights at Bridge Community Church after an eye appointment. But hey, right before we started, we were chatting a little bit. I think just fill people in. I'm trying to get from point A right here to point B, where you're going to tell me in a couple minutes how you got permission as a 14-year-old to ride a dirt bike on a city road. So,
Okay.
but tell us where you grew up, what your childhood was like, all those sorts of things.
Okay. Well, I was born and raised in Fullerton. Never moved out of Fullerton until 20 years ago when we moved to Orange. And
When you were 18, right?
yeah. But growing up in the 50s and the 60s, it was different, and my mother was Pentecostal.
Okay.
And so I grew up, like your son, I grew up in church. I never knew a Sunday where we weren't in church from the time that I was born or had any recollection until I was about 18.
What can you remember of? So I'm thinking Pentecostal church in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
What can you remember as a small kid being in a Pentecostal church service in the 50s?
Well, there was a lot of speaking in tongues, and I can remember this one guy in the church. The church that I went to was in Buena Park, and the congregation was about 100 people, so it was a very small, tight-knit
Okay.
group. It was a wood frame building with wood floors.
Built on a budget.
Yeah, and there was this one guy set up towards the front, and every time that he would get ready to speak in tongues, you could hear his foot just going. And then we were going, he's going to go off.
It's like a pitcher tipping his pitches. You know what pitch is coming.
Yeah. And so it was one of those deals where, being Pentecostal, it was something that you were kind of didn't want to share with anybody.
Okay.
Because everybody has this picture of or opinion of what these guys are wacko, and
So did you kind of pick up that vibe even at like school or something? Like,
oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And though the Christian aspect, it was there, but you were embarrassed by the label.
Okay.
And my dad was, he didn't like us going to church.
Oh, interesting. So you were primarily going with your mom.
Yes.
Okay.
And there were 5 kids, and
Where do you fall in the mix of the 5?
right in the middle.
Hey, me too. Middle of 5.
Yeah.
Oh, I've never done this. Reach over and high five.
So I was right in the middle, and my mom used to take us to church. My grandmother went there and brought our cousins. There were 5 of them, and we all, used to just go to the same thing. But it was one of those deals where eventually when I met Anita in high school.
Okay.
I was a senior, she was a junior, and she went to a Missionary Alliance church. And I went to her church, and it was just, to me, coming from that Pentecostal background, it was just dead as can be, you know. Everything was so scripted, and you sing 3 songs out of the book, and you sing first, second, and fourth verse, you know, and it was just like, there's no life here, you know,
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah.
And so I took her to our church, and she was she was scared to death. And so it was one of those deals where, okay, we've got to find something that will satisfy each of us, but not be in that place where you're just either bored to tears or freaked out, you know?
Yeah.
And so we started going to Melody Line.
Okay. So what year would that have been?
That would have been in like 1971.
So you guys had started dating by that point.
We had started dating.
Can I back you up? Because I have a question. You told me before we started that you grew up and your dad was a cop.
Yeah.
But he didn't go to church.
Right.
So was he kind of, I'm just picturing, cop in the 60s, kind of a disciplinarian, kind of hard guy?
No, not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. He was in the Army during World War II, stationed in the Pacific, and he had joined the Army like 4 years before Pearl Harbor, and he was scheduled to get out in February, and of course December hit, and so he was at Schofield Barracks over there, and when they bombed Pearl Harbor, he was there, and when he came home, he eventually got into the police department with, he was like 7 years in the Army then. He was a master sergeant. And so with his military experience, he was able to get a job on the police force. And back then, there were 10 people total on the Fullerton police force.
Wow, that's a different world. I can't imagine 10 people trying to police Fullerton now.
So 3 people during the day, 2 swing shift, and 2 graveyard. So the new guys got the graveyard shift. And so one of the stories that he used to tell us was they used to either get in drag races they would meet the Anaheim Police Department, and they would drag race down Harbor Boulevard. the 2 police departments.
You could never get away with that kind of stuff since the iPhone came out. Somebody would record it, and you would be in so much trouble.
Or they used to go in the foothills of Fullerton, and one guy would drive the car with the lights on and down these dirt roads, and the other guy would sit on the hood of the car with a shotgun, and they would shoot jackrabbits that would run across the... But it was different times, different...
Yeah, we're going to dive into your story. I'm just really curious because I know still to this day you love motorcycles. Yeah. And you were telling me the first motorcycle you bought was when you were 14. Yeah. And somehow your dad pulled some strings and got you permission to drive it. So tell me that story.
Yeah, he got permission for me to drive on the street, the housing tracks, but to stay off of the main streets like Valencia and Burkhurst and Euclid and all these streets in Fullerton. So to get from neighborhood to neighborhood, I would just have to cross the street, and get into this other neighborhood, and then you could take off and ride. But
I got to imagine you were a pretty cool 14-year-old if you went to school and kids knew that you could drive a motorcycle before you could get a driver's license.
Yeah, it was fun, but this was like a street. It was a trail bike. Back, nothing like a dirt bike nowadays. I mean, but because it had 2 sprockets on the back wheel, and one sprocket was for street riding, the smaller sprocket, and then it had a larger sprocket, and you had a length of chain like this that when you put it on the large sprocket, then you put this extra linkage in, and then you could go trail riding. But eventually, I had a Datsun pickup truck, and we would have my friends, they each had a dirt bike, so we would have all 3 dirt bikes in the back of my Datsun pickup truck, and after school, Sunny Hills High School backed up to the foothills in between Fullerton and La Habra, and there was nothing there but dirt trails to ride on from Beach Boulevard to Euclid. So a huge area up there where you could just go have all the fun, that you wanted to. This kid in high school, he was taking a multimedia class, and so he got a movie camera, and he would film us out there riding dirt bikes through the hills. And there was this one hill that was really cool. By then I had my second dirt bike, which is more real than the first one. And I can remember I would do a wheelie up this hill, and he was, filming this thing, and then they took it to school and showed it in the multimedia class, and it was just kind of a really neat time.
So somewhere along the line, you're a senior in high school, and you meet Anita. So a lot of people know Anita. I'm curious, what was your first impression of Anita, or how did you guys start dating?
There was we started dating. A friend of mine was dating Anita's sister.
Okay.
And so she was Mike's birthday. He was going to have a birthday party on his 18th birthday. So he invited me to come, and I didn't know this, but Anita's sister had also arranged for Anita to come too. And so it was kind of this setup that we just met, and eventually we left the party, and kind of there was a park around the corner from Mike's house, and we went to this park and just sat and just talked, and we started dating, and I just dropped all my friends, and
You were all in.
I was all in.
Right from the beginning.
Yeah.
Did she take some convincing, or was she all in too?
Oh, she was all in.
Oh.
We were both, just, it was just one of those things where it was so natural, and just, it was my first girlfriend.
Okay.
Had all kinds of crushes on, but it was the first time that I ever dated in high school.
Okay. So you guys start dating, and we'll get back to you trying to find a church that didn't freak Anita out and didn't bore the heck out of you. But how long did you guys date before you got married?
We dated for probably 2.5 years.
Okay. So you were very early 20s when you got married.
I was 19, she was 18.
So what you're saying is everyone who's listening that's 19 and 18, you guys should get married?
I was 2 years out of high school. She was 1 year out of high school. But we got engaged while she was a senior in high school.
Wow. It's incredible. It's very much what you're painting is kind of a different world, but it's right in the backyard of where we're sitting here.
Not everybody, like today, not everybody went to college.
Yeah.
And so I was going to Fullerton Junior College. And coming from a family of 5, there was no opportunity for me to do anything but go to junior college and then go to work.
Yeah.
And that's what we did.
So so you're raised in this Pentecostal church. She's in a Missionary Alliance church. You guys start dating, you get married, but there's something clearly where you clearly have faith in Jesus, because it's pretty uncommon for a 19-year-old to kind of venture out on their own and say, one of my main priorities is continuing to find a church. So what was kind of your upbringing in the sense of how you understood Jesus and your faith in Jesus?
The Pentecostal church, that there's several sects, I guess, of Pentecostal church.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the one where you have to wear long sleeves, the ladies can't cut their hair. It wasn't that type of thing. But movies we couldn't go to movies. Dancing was, we went to a summer camp, a church summer camp, and of course, you got boys and girls in separate dorms, but even the outdoor activities, like the pool, had a fence around it to where you couldn't see who was occupying the pool.
Interesting. So it's kind of an illustration in a way of like building a fence from anything that would tempt you or
Yes,
okay.
exactly. And so the girls would go, you'd wear a bathrobe and you would walk to the pool, and they would have their swim time and leave, and then the boys would,
Oh, okay. So there's not even like co-ed swim time.
no,
Oh.
no.
Okay.
You could- so that's kind of the the background that I grew up in, and it was, but the doctrinal stuff, the stuff of the faith in Jesus, all of that kind of stuff was rock solid. You got the word and you got the thing, but they were just so regimented on like non-important stuff.
Lots of layers of
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Almost like the Pharisees, that type of thing.
Yeah. So I think I have the year right. You said it was 1971. You and Anita walk into Melodyland.
Yeah, we walk into Melodyland, and it was it was a large church which neither one of us had attended before. So it had things that we had never seen in a small church. And they had activities that you could do. And one of the things that they had there was their choir during Easter, Christmas, and they had a charismatic clinic that they would have every August in the summertime. And they would have about a 300-person choir.
It's 3 times bigger than the church you grew up at.
Yeah.
Just singing.
Yeah, exactly. And they would put on these performances, these live productions. And so Anita was a singer. Her sister was a singer. They drug me along, and we started participating in these shows that they did.
Okay.
And because I didn't know, I had a wood shop, a metal shop. I was never in a singing group or anything. So I didn't know anything, the difference between an alto and a soprano and a bass and a tenor, So
Yeah.
anyway, it was one of those deals where it was really special. We ended up going on tour in the East Coast during the bicentennial. And we sang, we went to New York and then to Washington, D.C., and we sang at all these we sang at the Pentagon, we sang at the Capitol, we sang...
Is that sorry to interrupt you, but is that a lot to do with, because at that moment of time, Melodyland was a very influential church. You could basically go anywhere in the country, and if that was, if you were kind of slightly charismatic, everyone would have known of it.
Yes. It was kind of like Rick Warren's church, a big mega church.
Yeah.
And they had, big name speakers would come in. So it was just a really neat thing. And it's funny because being raised in a Pentecostal church, I had never had the experience of speaking in tongues. And even though I had sought it at different times, growing up,
Yeah.
it never happened. And it wasn't until Melodyland in my mid-20s that it actually, I had the experience.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because it wasn't like I had sought it and sought it and sought it for so long, and when it happened, I had this feeling like, is that it? Is that really it, or am I faking it? I think being from an engineering background, I probably thought too much,
Very analytical guy. Yeah. Interesting. So you're attending Melodyland. It seems like you're enjoying it, clearly.
Oh, it was a really great time. And by then, we had 2 kids.
What are you doing for work at this point?
At this point, after I graduated from Fullerton JC, it was right around the time of Vietnam. So as soon as I turned 18, I had to go down and, they had the lottery, the draft lottery back then.
Right.
And so what they would do is they would pull out they would start with like number 1, and then they had a thing where they just pulled out a date, like January 27th. Well, that's number 1, okay? And they would go and they would.
Oh, and that was by
your
birthday.
By your birth date, yeah. And so every year, probably anyone with a number from 1 to 200 would get drafted. I got 25. And so I was going to junior college. We were getting ready to get married. And so I applied for a student deferment and never got word, never got anything so they had called me down to the Los Angeles at the induction center, and you got to go through a physical process where they deem you, practically everybody, 1A, 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 ready to go. And so, sure enough, I was classified as 1A, and so I was just waiting as I was going to school.
So you're already in your mind thinking, it's just a matter of them calling me and telling me when.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in March of my second year, we got married. And so that was another layer. And we were just thinking that I was good as gone. And so I went down to an induction center and tried to join, but getting in the Corps of Engineers. And they wouldn't make any promises. They wouldn't, they just wanted you to sign the line for 3 years and, we'll take care of you type thing. And I said, no, you come and get me. And so as it turned out, I guess I had a deferment, and when I graduated, it had expired. And so I was waiting that summer just to go. So I didn't go out and even try to get a job. I was actually working at the Orange County Medical Center developing x-rays in the emergency room.
Wow.
While I was going to school. And which is now UCI
Medical Center. Yeah.
It used to be a county hospital.
Oh, okay. I had no idea.
Yeah. And so I just continued working there and just waiting to go. And so we didn't buy much furniture because we thought that Anita's just going to move back with her mom when I'm gone. And it turned out that in like November, I think the draft expired, and the Congress and the House, anyway, they went through their Christmas holidays, and it wasn't going to be when they reconvened in January that they would renew the draft. And so I was just sitting there through all this time, just sweating bullets. But I never got called.
Wow.
I never got called. And then the following, I don't know, it was February or March, they ended that's when they withdrew and ended up not having to go at all, which was a blessing.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So you get to be married, and now you got to look for a job. So I know what you did as a career, but I'm just curious at one point did you start kind of heading in that direction?
I went to I had some architectural classes in high school, my sophomore and junior years, and then my senior year, I had taken everything that they had as far as architecture, and they had a technical illustration class, and I took that and absolutely loved it. It's where you do, like, it's more, well, it's half technical and half artistic, and so.
So I'm not totally sure I'm clear what that actually is. What
Okay.
exactly is that?
Well, you know when you buy a toy for your kid and
Yeah.
they have the exploded view
Yep.
of the thing that shows all the parts, going
Yeah.
out and all these.
Just built one of those, man.
And so I would be the one that would draw all of that, the pieces, and
I see. Okay, that's awesome.
yeah, and but it was also, like being a graphic art. This was before computers, and so everything was done. All the artwork was done by hand. All of that illustration stuff was drafting,
Wow.
but and I was more geared towards the technical side than the artistic side. I could copy stuff, but creating something from scratch artistically, it just, it wasn't there. Some guys are just, that's all they do, and other guys, and when you get into architecture, that's the way it is. You've got the designers and you got the technical guys.
Yeah.
These guys tell you how it's going to look. These guys tell you how to put it together. And so I went, after Vietnam era was over, I went out looking for a job, and I spent probably 6 months trying to get a job anywhere. And there was nothing in Orange County. It was all in LA, and I applied for places and couldn't find anything. So finally I got frustrated, and I saw an ad in the paper for thrifty drugstores. They were looking for an architectural trainee.
Oh, I was thinking they were gonna be looking for an ice cream taste tester, man. Best ice cream.
So I got my drawings from high school, and I went down and applied, and I got the job.
Wow.
And I started working there in summer of 1973, and it was a really neat experience because they had an architectural department. They had a construction department where we would do the drawings for remodels, existing stores. And they had crews that would then go out and...
This was all
It
in-house.
was all in-house. They even had a wood shop in back where they built all the fixtures. So we would do all the drawings for the cabinet work and stuff.
Wow.
So it was really neat because it was all in-house, and you learned the full scope of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there for 21 years, and it eventually got caught in one of those corporate mergers where a takeover specialist came in and bought the company, and then they would just strip it of everything, and then they would sell it off to another drug company, and they would end up merging the two companies together. But I got such an education there in the whole building process, being involved in drawing the cabinets, being involved in the actual construction stuff too. Not actually physically doing the work, but supervising it to where, it was done per your plans and that type of stuff.
Yeah. That's awesome.
It was really, it's almost like the old way of doing it through apprenticeship,
I can tell how you're talking about it that you really did love it.
I did.
Yeah. Yeah, It's so cool to hear stories of people who kind of jumped into a career path early on and they just fell in love with it.
Life just kind of steers you.
Yeah.
You know, you have these intentions, and life kind of steers you. And you can see the hand of God as you look back.
Yeah.
You can see it so clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you made mention you had 2 kids. So let's go all the way back to that. Let's talk about 2 kids entering your life. That must have been
Okay.
some whiplash.
It was. We waited 3 years until Amy was born. So
Okay.
we were married for 3 years and just had this great time of just the two of us, you know.
Right.
And then Amy came along, and almost 3 years later, we had our second, Aaron,
Yeah.
a boy. And Amy was.
Yeah, people are going to know Amy, so let's hear some Amy stories.
Well, she was just the perfect kid, you know. You put her to bed, and she
Stays in the bed.
stays in the bed, and she was the compliant kid.
Okay.
Aaron was just the opposite. He was a handful from the start. You know, he wanted to test the limits on everything. And Aaron is the one that got us into Sunday school teaching, because we would be in the car driving to Melodyland, coming up the 5 freeway from Fullerton, and Melodyland was built. It was a theater in the round, and then it had this roof that looked like a tent on the outside, a big spire in the on the top.
Okay.
He would see that spire from the freeway and just start screaming, you know. He was attached to his mom so closely that, well, one of the things about Melodyland was it was so big that the kid would, every 6 months, he would go into a different Sunday school class.
Oh, just because they had to break it up so
The
much.
age group, yeah.
Okay.
You know, this is 0 to 6 months. This is 6 months to 12,
Wow.
12 to 18, and he couldn't handle that transition. He would just get used and comfortable with the person that was, you know, in there doing the
Yeah.
watching and the teaching and stuff. So by the time 4 years old came around, it was just impossible to get him.
Piecing things together. He saw that building and knew I don't want to go there.
Yeah, exactly. And so,
You know what? I hate to cut you off, but it sounds awfully familiar. It sounds sort of like a kid who ran away from Sunday school a couple weeks ago.
I know I knew exactly how you felt, but so we decided that we would volunteer to start teaching, and that's where we met Millie.
Okay, so she was already in place, already teaching.
She was the superintendent of the Sunday school over there. Wow. So she got us a place in kindergarten where we would teach the kindergartners. And because they had multiple services, you know, we were in a group that taught from like 9 to 10:30. And because Anita played the piano, we would have these singing times, and so they probably had like 4 Sunday school classes of just kindergartners from probably 15 to 20 kids. So when you brought them all together, you had like 50 to 60 kids. And it was because of him that we got hooked up with Millie. And once she gets her claws in you, you know, you're hooked.
Is she still calling you to this day? She's still calling you. What year was that? 1974?
That was, well, Aaron was born in 77, so that was probably like in the early 80s.
Okay.
It's probably like 81 when...
So in your own words, it's not my words, Millie got her claws in you, and
Yeah.
I bet she's still calling you 40 years later.
She is.
Yeah.
So we taught there for probably 2 years, and then that's about the time that big breakup occurred in Melodyland. You know, there were things going on that caused the church to seek other places, and that's when John and Ruth Ann and Phyllis and Noel started Zion.
Yeah.
And we were there the first day that of the church when this place was birthed.
Yeah, and so many people tell that story. I think it was Phyllis was one of the episodes of the podcast here,
Yeah.
and she was saying that she's sitting in the front, twiddling her thumbs, biting her nails, looking in a mirrored room,
Yeah.
hoping that just a few people would
Yeah.
show up. And it sounds like more than a few people showed up.
It was incredible. And then eventually they bought this building,
Yeah,
and it was, it was a gift from God that we did get this place, but it needed a lot of work, and it needed a lot of attention, I guess.
and I'd imagine your background, you probably saw some things other people weren't seeing.
Yeah. There was, about the time that we got this place, that's when Thrifty's was sold off, and I was given what happens is that Thrifty and Payless drugstores, which was another West Coast drugstore chain, they combined together, and the decision was made to run the combined company out of Wilsonville, Oregon. So I was given an invitation to go up there and work. And I had just come on the board here at this church. I think I'd been on it for a year. And I felt like, by then our kids, I think Amy was either the end of high school. Both of our kids were in high school, or Amy was just starting junior college herself. And I felt like I'm not going to relocate my family. It's not a good time.
Yeah.
And my boss at the time, he called me in his office and he says, I don't care what you think is right. You cannot pass up this opportunity. And he just called me a fool for making the decision not to go.
Mm.
And one of the biggest reasons, because I felt like God had something for me to do here.
Yeah.
And so I come on the board, and the board guys are like in their 60s and 70s. I was probably in my just 40. And here I am, this kid coming on the board, and I'm going, why, okay, God, why am I here? And, we did during that first year, we did some fix-it type stuff, but on New Year's Day in 1990, it was the start of 1995. This glue-lamp beam right here, at the middle of the service, you just heard this big crack, and like thunder, And what happened was the glue lamp had split right in the middle, and there was a crack running through the beam, laterally, probably 14 feet on each side, where it had delaminated. And these beams have a camber in them that's like 14 inches, like a bow.
Yeah.
And so this thing had dropped 7 inches with that crack.
And it's made like that to hold the weight, clearly. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so the service ended at that point, and we, left the building. And so it's just like, okay, Don, you've got the background here, go for it. And so there was myself and one of the guys in the congregation, Kurimay. He was a contractor, and another guy, Ron Rusk, was an electrical contractor. And so I contacted a structural engineer, and he gave me the information I needed to erect a scaffold. We rented a scaffold from one of these rental yards. The three of us put this thing together to just stabilize that beam until we could call somebody in here to find out, what do we got to do to fix it. And so it was at that point that I knew, okay, God, you've got a purpose for me here. And I can see, why you persuaded me to stay.
Yeah. It's got to be cool, especially as you were saying, you felt like the youngster, the young guy. It's not cool that a beam delaminates in the middle of the service and cracks, but it's got to be just kind of a breath of fresh air and a vote of confidence that nobody knows what to do except you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we'll get there, but that was not the first time you had a major part in making sure this building stayed standing up.
No.
We'll get there in a little while, but
yeah.
So you have two kids in high school, or Amy's just finishing high school. That's kind of an interesting transition for parents, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's you're kind of already anticipating some independence in your kids, and so what was that season of life like for you?
It was, at that time that I lost, decided not to take that position, I was able to. There was a period of about 6 months that I was able to, one by one, get each one of my guys that were working. Well, by the time of that 21 years, I was actually in charge of the entire construction and design department.
Wow.
And I was able to get every one of my guys placed in an architectural firm. And but when it came to me, I couldn't find a job anywhere. There were a lot of takeovers going on at that time. And so everybody in the industry was they weren't moving around. They were just sitting, in place, because you never knew if you were going to be bought out, the next day or what. And so I can remember it was on 1994, Veterans Day, was my last day at Thrifty's. And I remember walking out of that building and going, God, what am I going to do? And because I had spent, during that 6 months, I had also been actively looking for myself. And there was just nothing out there. I would go on interviews, and every time it just seemed like the door was just slammed in your face. And I would, on these interviews, I would think, okay, this is the one. This is the one. Some of them were worth, and I was trying to get a position in with another retailer, or because I applied at Disney for the they had a division that just did the Disney stores. There was a First Interstate Bank. There was Vaughn's grocery store was looking for someone to be the head of their construction department, and okay, this is the one, and I had connections through the people at Thrifty's in the real estate department and the construction department, and but I never could land the job. Part of it was I didn't have the formal education to back up of the position that I was trying to get into at these other companies. I didn't go to school to be an architect. I didn't have a bachelor's degree. But in the state of California, you can, after you've worked in the architectural field under a licensed architect for 8 years, you can apply to take the test. And there's 7 tests that you have to take. I'm sorry, there's 9. There's 9 tests that you have to take. You know, each one of them are in a different area of art, like structural design and mechanical, electrical, plumbing design, history, architectural history. And these are all classes that I had never had, but I had the hands-on experience.
Yeah, that's what you were saying earlier. It was like an apprenticeship. It was like the old school. Yeah, which I mean, you're not learning from a book. You're learning in real time with real materials.
Yeah. So I don't have that formal education or the degree or the architectural license to qualify for the position that I was looking for, even though I had done it
Right.
for all these years. And I can remember sitting at my dining room table and just going, God, you know, what are you doing? I feel like I'm all alone. And so I reached out to an architectural firm that we had done business with. And it just so happened that they were looking for someone with drugstore experience because they just got a Save-On account.
Okay.
Save-On drugstores. And there were another drug chain out here on the West Coast. And so they decided to take a chance and hire me. So I was now working in an architectural firm where you are you're hired by the person that I used to be to do, you know, the new stores and stuff. And I was, in my former position, I would hire them to do the new stores, and then I would do all the quality control and the you know, and red line their drawing to say,
Right.
here, this is not right, fix this. And so it was now I was on the other end, and these clients were, you know, it was such a switch
Yeah.
from what I had been. But I got the kids through school and you know, got Amy through college. She graduated from Vanguard University.
Yeah.
And Aaron was he wanted to go in the ministry, and he wanted to be in like urban mission work. He had a heart for hurting people.
Yeah.
And but so, and he wanted to go away to go to school. So he got accepted at Moody in Chicago.
Yeah. Moody Bible Institute. Yeah.
He got accepted there. Well, Moody is a very a kid from Southern California doesn't fit in a school like that is kind of very conservative and very like a Midwestern culture, I would say.
Okay.
So Aaron was taunted by kids, and he would do stuff just to make them, just to freak them out. Like one time he dyed his hair orange, and it just sent these kids in a tailspin. And so there ended up being so much conflict that he kind of gave up towards the end of the first semester.
Okay.
And he called us up and said, I want to come home. And I said, no, you got to finish your semester. You got to finish well. At least get through that, and we'll come home. We'll bring you home, and we'll transfer you to another college that would fit. So Aaron came home, finished out the semester, and come to find out, he just quit going.
Oh.
And so his first semester was just gone.
Yeah.
And so there's another Bible school out here it's out in San Dimas area that's affiliated with Assembly of God or something. I can't remember the name of the school. But he ended up going there, living at home, but
Commuting out there.
And Aaron was not fit for college.
He sounded like from the day he was born, he was testing the limits and having a good time.
Aaron was a charmer, and people you either loved him or you just absolutely couldn't stand it. The teachers were, he grew up with getting in, either charming him or they just hated the guy.
So did that come from you or did that come from Anita?
Oh, that's Anita.
She's going to hear this. You want me to edit that out or you're okay with that?
I'm okay. No, but he, it's that type of personality that they're the creative ones.
Yeah.
They're the ones that get the stuff done that the people like me that I like this box,
Right.
I like the rules and I follow the rules and everything's in order.
Right.
Where he's, that free thinker. And, but, Aaron got into trouble. He had a heart, but he had 1 foot in the world, 1 foot in the church, and he couldn't reconcile either one. And so he basically, the academic career was over, and he went to work in the restaurant industry. And as all of his friends started to grow up and leave the party scene and get married, have a degree, start to have kids, he was the one that was left behind with no, still friends, but he developed another set of friends outside of them that none of us knew about. And he got into drugs and got into, had an alcohol problem.
Yeah.
And he just got into trouble financially and
Was this pretty transparent with you, or was this kind of swept under the rug secret?
It was secret until his life just started to fall apart.
Okay.
When he got into financial problems, then it became apparent that there were other issues that were, causing a lot of this behavior. And he got, he lost his car. He lost, he was living downtown Orange here in one of these little, older homes he was renting. He lost the house, and there were a couple times where he had bailed him out and tried to set him on a path where, and it just got to the point to where something happened at where he worked, and he left a note on. He had moved back home at that time. He's 27 years old now.
Mm-hmm.
And he had moved back home, and he left a note on the counter in the living room, in the kitchen, where I'll I'm going to so and so's house. I'll be back in 3 days. And that was Super Bowl. Well, the last time that we saw him was Super Bowl Sunday, 17 years ago.
Yeah.
And he left that note, said, I'll be back in 3 days. And it wasn't unusual when you got a 27-year-old adult living
Yeah, that you're not
back at your house.
keeping tabs on him
Yeah.
all the time.
We worked days, he worked nights, and we hardly ever saw each other, even though, he would sleep during the day and we were. But, so he left that note, and he was gone. And I believe that he got into trouble and decided to it was better to spare us the knowledge of whatever was happening. And to this day, we haven't seen him.
Yeah.
And, it drove us to a place of desperation. It's one thing when something tragic happens and you can deal with the problem because they're still there. But or even with a death, there is a finality to it. Where with this, there's just, you can't close the books on it, It's still just hanging out there, and when you finally realize it's gone and you file the missing persons report, you find out that because he's a 27-year-old male, he's an adult, he's doing what he wants to do. There's not
a whole lot of resources that are even bothering to look.
And this was before, the internet, and so you didn't have those resources. You just had the old police investigation stuff, or we even hired a private investigator to try to track him through the typical things through your social security number and to help locate people. And nothing ever turned up. So he's probably a different identity. I think that's probably what happened. But it drove us to a point to where that desperation and that despair and the loss of hope.
Yeah.
And Anita I'm kind of like, okay, this box, I can compartmentalize and move on with your life. Where Anita, mother, she felt like she was like the only one that was, I didn't have the same level of a concern that she did. So it started to, there was friction that was coming up between us. And we had reached the point to where we just, life was so, the daily stuff was so hard to just keep going that you wanted to back out of anything that you could. And one of the tricks of the enemy is to just isolate you. And so we went to Millie, because at this point I was ushering, she was, Anita was, we were both teaching Sunday school. And we just felt like we needed a break. And so Millie being Millie, she starts asking questions. And she allowed us to back out, but she said, I'll tell you what. I want you to come to our house on Thursday, and we're going to pray. So we started a regiment of going to their house every Thursday night. And for probably like 3 hours, we would just cry out before God. And I can remember being on a heap on the floor. And just crying out to God. But, being a Christian all my life, you don't really, it's through those hard times where the Word becomes alive.
Yeah.
And Pastor John gave us a sheet of paper with some scripture references on it. And John, it was neat because the scripture reference was there, but he didn't write out the verse. So I had to go and write out the stuff that John gave us. And
you still have it.
I still have it. It's here somewhere. But and what it was,
Wow.
It broke down when I wrote those scriptures out. It broke it down into, some of them were God's character. Some of them was a restoration of hope.
Mm.
And the last one was warfare. And I'm going, I can't do warfare. So we started through that and through those times at Millie's house. We did that for 7 years.
Wow.
And through that time, what we would do is we would start to just, over a period of time, you start, okay, let's read about God's character. And you just recite those scriptures. Before we prayed, we'd just go through the Bible, and we would just start rehearsing the character of God.
Wow.
And once you get the character of God in your head, the hope starts to come back. And once that's restored, then you're ready for warfare.
Mm.
And I started, you've had the names of Jehovah, Jehovah Jireh, Jehovah Rapha, Jehovah Shalom, all the different things. So I started, okay, I want to start writing down the character of God and the scripture references. And so, in the Old Testament, you go through Genesis and Exodus and Deuteronomy and Samuel. In Chronicles, you start seeing, all of those. That's where all of those things come up. And I got to Psalms, and I just went through the book of Psalms and just started writing out of a notebook at home, where I just started writing out these things about everything it said about God. I just would, write out. It got to be this paper here where...
They're not going to be able to see on the camera. That's like size 8 font.
Yeah. And it's single space, and it's like 13 pages of Psalms. Where...
Wow.
Where it's, And it's like he is. And that became such a healing thing for us. And it developed into where we were just, restored to where we started noticing we're not the only ones going through this. There's people that are going through just as difficult things in the church. And so Millie started making appointments with people where we would go to their house, and we would bring a group of 10 or 12 people with us, and these people would open up their hearts and they would just share what was going on. We'd go through scriptures again for a half an hour to an hour of just rehearsing the character of God and just praying over. Praying over what was going on in their home.
Yeah.
And it turned into a ministry thing where we were sharing what God had done in us and taking it.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing. I mean, I can tell it's not an easy thing to just open up and always talk about. As you're kind of telling the story, I'm just reminded of the scripture that it's by his wounds that, so often we think of God as, high and mighty and miracle worker, and we forget that he too knows the power of a wound.
Yeah.
I just think it's so beautiful that even in your woundedness, and some of it, like you said, there hasn't been a finality.
Mm-hmm.
There hasn't been an absolute, this is exactly what happened. But even in the midst of feeling like, I'm sure you want to know, but even in the midst of that God has given you opportunity to say, even with your wound, share your wound as common ground with other wounded people.
Yeah.
And trust that I'll use you.
Yeah. There was, I want to share something. There was a time where I was traveling a lot, and I happened to be back in Arkansas, Bentonville, Arkansas, for a corporate meeting with Walmart. And I was in a hotel room. It was Thursday night. My wife, Anita, was at Chet Millie's doing the prayer thing. And because of the time difference, I had, they were praying, and I had laid down and gone to sleep in the hotel room. And I woke up a little bit later, and there was just a oppressive spirit in that room. And I remember there was just all of these vile thoughts and images that were just like flashing in my mind, and I couldn't stop it. Mm. And as I laid there, I just started quoting some of these. He is. Mm. And I just started speaking out that, God, you are my comforter. God, you're my strength and my salvation. You said that you would never leave me. And just going through these and just speaking out these precepts. And as I did, I could begin to feel this oppression just start to, it was like somebody opened up a drain and it was slowly draining. But there was, at the same time, there was this peace that was just mounting. Mm. And mounting. And after a few minutes, there was such a calmness and peace that I had never felt before. And it was fighting with his word. Yeah. And that's that's the thing that we have learned, you know. You've been a Christian for all this time, and how many times have you read, you know, through here to where the scripture isn't alive, or it's become, you know, such a big part of your life, and you have the tools.
Yeah.
But do you pick them up and do you use them? And that was such an illustration to me of, you know, how powerful the word is sharper as any two-edged sword, you know. And I don't know that night what would have happened or what, but I just know that, you know, he was with me and he was true to his word.
What I love about that is, and I love about this list as I'm kind of looking over it, is I think so often we can trick ourselves into thinking that God is kind of like this silver bullet that, you know, you just recite these and problem solved.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in your story and something that I hope people hear in you sharing some of these things is this is an everyday kind of thing. This is a battle that you wage until the Bible is in you, that God's word is in you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make the battle easy. It makes the you know, that muscle memory of what tool or what weapon you grab to fight it faster and faster and faster.
Yeah.
I love this. You know, and I might forget, and so I just want to say this. It flashed across my mind. I'm just curious. I'm assuming you have this saved like on a computer.
We do.
People are going to watch this, and I just have been doing a handful of episodes and have a feeling. Would it be okay if you emailed this to me? I'd love to just have these maybe at our welcome desk.
Okay.
Maybe you could just write a little note from Don Grainger. So yeah, if you're listening to this and you just feel like, man, I have a battle I've been waging or a wound that I just don't know what to do with, this is a wonderful tool. So we'll have those for people. Thank you for sharing all that, Don. I know that's not easy. And I know you've shared it a lot of times, and it doesn't necessarily get easier. I'm just curious. I want to hear more of your story, but I just kind of want to pause. If people are in a similar place, maybe it's not the same exact situation, but they just feel like there's no closure, or there's a wound that just won't heal. What, other than going to God's character, what advice could you give to people? What wisdom could you share maybe about your relationships with others, or counting on others, or those sorts of things? What would you share with people?
Well, the biggest thing, I think, was don't get isolated from the body. You know, that was the first thing that we tried to do, was to remove ourselves and just kind of hide in our hurt, you know, and somehow we'll get through it on our own.
Was that like a conscious choice you made, or do you just feel like in that moment of grief and kind of darkness that it's just human nature that's what you do?
Probably it's human nature, but it's contradictory to your healing too. You know, because that's where the strength you can draw from. I mean, Chet and Millie, John and Ruth Ann, you know, they all reached out to us, and it was through that interaction. Peg and Gus, you know, there are so many solid people in this church that have the experience that, and when you're weak and when you need that strength, you know, they can guide you through it and they can help you through it. And we all tend to think that some of our problems are we're the only ones going through. I can remember Danny let us speak on a Sunday morning to tell the story. And this was just a couple months after Aaron had disappeared. And I remember the altar call. Down here where, you know, he said, again, the same thing. Is there anybody that is going through something? And this place just, it filled. Yeah. And you knew that that's where the idea of, using that to springboard into helping others. And that was, I think, one of the biggest eye-openers for us. And it also strengthened us. It's carried us through this time.
Yeah, it's incredible. Thank you again for sharing that. So it's been 17 years.
17 years tomorrow.
And I got to imagine that just day to day, it's just something that's always in the background.
It is. Every holiday is, as things approach, birthdays and, all the Christmas, Easter, and all that stuff, you start to feel this a couple days before the event. There's just something like hanging around until you're not even aware of it, that, okay, this is another Christmas, or this is another birthday without Aaron.
Yeah. I imagine, based on how you described his personality, that you tell stories about him. I'm just curious. You got to have a go-to story that just brings joy to you. What's a family story about Aaron?
Well, he was the life of the party. He was always the one that he loved to press my buttons.
No, the type A square box thinker is getting his buttons pushed by the out of the box guy.
Yeah, and he would just he was a special kid, and God had a calling on his life. And that's what we pray for all the time, that God, that you would use him, whatever life experience he's going through, that first of all, that you would speak to him, that you would help him to remember that calling, and that he would be able to fulfill it someday.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I want to move our story forward a little bit. I think it's a huge jump in time.
Uh-huh.
But I didn't know the story about the cracked beam up here. And it's interesting how you described it. You had kind of described it as you were the youngster on the church board and feeling like, where's my place? And then all of a sudden, a huge lamb starts to crack, and that's your place.
Yeah.
So people might not know this. I don't know if the photo is still up in our lobby, but there's a photo in our lobby, and it's a quick snapshot of a moment in time in this church's history where this current building and how it looks right now, there was a decision made, more or less, that, we want to leave something beautiful to the next generation as they grow into leadership and minister.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about, you were on the church board again.
Yeah.
What was the gap in time?
Well, I was on the church board for 24 years.
Okay.
A span of 24 years. And so towards the end, Danny had a vision of what, he wanted to do here. The church, how the story of how the Israelites, or the Hebrews, when they were in the wilderness, you've been preaching about it, their shoes never wore out.
Yeah.
Well, that was this building, how we felt that, there was never, God always provided, but there was never enough for a big project. We had kept this building going with Band-Aids and everything else.
And I'm sure with your background, you looked around and you could find the Band-Aids pretty quick.
Yeah. And so Danny had a vision of what we would like to do. We had a large auditorium where it seated about 1,000 people. But yet our congregation isn't that big. The office spaces were horrible, and they were spread out to where nobody was together.
That's what you really think.
And so anyway, and kind of the mentality too was don't borrow money. Just keep it going. And well, it was decided that, okay, we are going to proceed with a renovation. We are going to borrow some money. And so Danny, George, and I started visiting probably, 3 years before the renovation started. We started visiting other churches and looking at, we went to a large church out in Newport Beach. We went to a small church here in Orange. We went to a medium-sized church. In fact, Vanguard University had just renovated their, there's a church sanctuary there. And we went and looked there. And from each one of them, we were picking ideas and getting to the point to where, okay, let's get something down on paper. And so with the knowledge and everything that God had given me and started to, draw some sketches out. And so we did a lot of research and everything. And it finally came to the point, okay, let's draw the actual building plans. And we called structural engineers in here. We called, the different sources, and they started to look around and investigate stuff. And come to find out, when the solution, to fix these beams, they put these post-tension cables in, and there's like, I don't know how many thousands of pounds of pressure to bring those. To keep the camber in these things, well, it was causing problems. These glue lamps sit on these pilasters you can see on these back walls. Well, the caps of the pilasters, because of the tension that it created, started to pull and started to crack the top of these pilasters. And the building was built before the Northridge earthquake and, all of those things. So there were seismic issues in here that had to be addressed because it was just falling apart. And there were things that we discovered that were could have turned into another catastrophic failure of, the structure. And so we spent, unfortunately, because of funding and the different loans and the banks holding up on releasing funds and stuff, a 6-month project turned into like 2.5 years.
I remember. I recall.
And, but, I've told Danny, I said, this is kind of the crowning moment of my career, because I spent my whole career, 45 years, doing retail buildings. And this is something that God allowed me at the end, where I felt that I did something with an eternal value.
Yeah.
You use those.
So just so we're clear, so when people hear this, you designed this building.
Yeah. Yes.
And people, I don't know if you know this, but still to this day, we will have a guest here and they will walk in and say things like, wow, I had no idea this building could hold something inside so beautiful.
Yeah.
We get comments. I just got a comment last week. I had a group of guys and they came in, they said, is it okay if we walk around and just see these offices? I've never seen offices so cool.
Yeah.
And I always just chuckle. I just think Don Grainger did that.
Yeah. It was one of those deals. There were a couple things, on the board, and like the Sunday school rooms and stuff. That was all Amy, my daughter. She was on staff at the time, and that was her idea. And she put some ideas down on paper, and the board, gave us a budget, and so all those things in the Sunday school rooms I built in my garage, and it's just been fun to use that talent that God's given you, not only in architecture, but in, I like to do woodwork, and I like to do, the classrooms that your kid is in now, all that stuff was built in our garage. Anita painted a lot of the stuff, and it was just a really fun time of feeling like, okay, you're pouring back into the place, and you're building a fun environment for the kids to where you're not going into a room that's just 4 blank walls. And
I'm glad you said that. I had this gut feeling that I was going to have to like pull it out of you because you're a humble guy. Do you ever just sit back like on a Sunday? Do you ever feel like God just whispers to you like, "Well done"?
Yeah, I'll sit in here, and I'll just look up and look around and just, thank God that, it took a lot of people to do it. Of
course,
it wasn't just me, but there's that scripture that talks about, from your generation to this, the being part of God's family, the generational thing is so important. And that's what I liked about this so much, is like, okay, we're good for another few generations to, use and wear this place out. And then, it'll be somebody else's turn to come along down the road and, fix it for the next group.
Yeah, so if you're 8 or 9 years old and you're listening to this, go into architecture. We're going to need you in about 50 years.
Yeah.
Man, that's awesome. So, we're kind of heading towards the end of our time here together, but I know there's lots of change going on in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And just what's on the horizon for the Graingers?
Well, we're actually moving to Tennessee.
Okay.
I knew that God, back in 95, I knew that God had called me to stay here because there was a purpose.
Yeah.
And I felt that my purpose, that we were kind of between generations, and Anita and I, it seemed like everybody was like, when you look at a lot of the founders, we were like 10 years in age behind, these people. And then you've got the founders' kids that, were, 10 years behind us. And so I always felt like I was a bridge from like Noel and John, a bridge to help Danny, Danny was so young, and I was that bridge, being on the board and doing, all the stuff that we were involved with, that through that period to where now this is established, the sanctuary is done, the church is in great shape, and I feel released.
That's, I think you said something that's so key. I've had this conversation probably 15, 20 times. It's the conversation of, if we're honest, California is not the most convenient, comfortable, affordable place to live anymore. It's just not.
Yeah.
And I love what you said, because I've been trying so hard to communicate to people. If you want to move, if you want to leave, make sure it's God's calling in your life.
Yeah.
If it's God's calling, then peace to you.
Yeah.
God is going to have something incredible for you. But I love what you said, because, there's so much of a temptation to run away from adversity and difficulty and challenge, and not ever consider, is this where God is calling me to?
Mm-hmm.
So I love how you said that. I think I just want people to know that I 100% know that you're called to it. And I love that you felt like that opportunity arose long ago, and you felt like it wasn't God's time and it wasn't God's call yet. As we kind of wrap up, Don, I was thinking about you, and I was flipping through some verses. I knew that you were going to come on 2 or 3 weeks ago. You said that you would join me up here, and so I was just kind of reading through. In the morning, I like to occasionally read through the Psalms, and when I get there, I read Proverbs, and then I just kind of start over. No rhyme or reason to it. I just feel like it's a good place to start. And I was flipping through the other day, and I thought, I think this one's for Don. And I think the verse that I want to read you, it's a really simple one, but my hope, and I hope that you hear this from me, this is kind of my impression of you. This is kind of how I view you. And I hope that you hear that I think this is a lot of people's view of you. And I think as they listen to this podcast, I think it's just more true than ever. It's from Proverbs chapter 10. It says, "When there are many words, transgression is unavoidable, but he who restrains his lips is wise." When I read that and I was thinking about you, I thought, you know what? In some ways, you're kind of a curiosity to me, which is why I wanted to talk to you, because I've never talked to you like this before. This is really cool. But there's just something about you, Don, that every time I've ever, even just said hello to you, is I think people know that there is wisdom locked up in there. Mm-hmm. That there is a depth, and I think some of your stories of joy and pain are part of that. But I think that your wisdom has come out in so many ways other than just your words. It's this place, and I hope that even as you transition and you head to Tennessee, I hope there's a whole generation that might not ever know your name, but they are living into the blessing that you had left them. There's going to be people who come to this stage and say, I want to follow Jesus with my whole life. And part of that was they came into a place that seemed comfortable and approachable. And you had so much to do with that. So I just want you to know that and hear that from me. I know these conversations for you are few and far between, so I got to get it all in there. As we kind of wrap up, is there anything you just want to leave with people? If they've heard this and they just want to hear some of that wisdom, what is something that you'd like to leave with people?
Like I said earlier, I think the biggest thing is the faithfulness of God. I can look back through my life through everything where you're not seeing. You wonder why didn't I get that job? Why didn't our house sell at that particular time? Why didn't all of these things happen? But when you actually look back and see what God accomplished, because he didn't do it at that time that you thought that he was going to do it. He is so faithful, and he has always been there, even when you don't feel it or see it or can't understand it. He's there, and it's so evident at this stage of my life as I look back. It's just incredible to see his hand.
That's awesome. One last question. When are you guys taking off for Tennessee?
Probably in the middle of May, about that time.
Okay, so what is that, 2-3 months, something like that?
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this and you got 3 months to ambush Don Grainger and get him to talk, yeah, grab him by the shirt collar and tell him, I've seen you talk on YouTube before, so talk to me. But Don, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for just being vulnerable and open. We really appreciate it, and I hope that this is as big of a blessing to so many others as it's been to me. So
thank you.
I appreciate you. All right, we're gonna sign off.
Okay.